Hey, welcome, friends, live on the call and friends who watch this afterwards. We're so glad you could be with us. This is really one of our most requested topics, how to build better bones, how to be strong and hardy. And our presenter is my dear friend, Nancy Birang. And Nancy is a nutrition consultant and was a longtime teacher and guide and mentor at Bauman College in Santa Cruz, California. And she was also a founding member of Nourishing Traditions, Nourishing Generations. Is that correct?
That's right, Nourishing
Generations, which is a nonprofit based out of Santa Cruz in the South Bay, where they provide programs for youth and for schools and children's and families and people in need, where nutrition and wellness is presented. And also, Nancy has quite an experience working in cancer care and working with cancer care clinics in the South Bay. And again, being a nutritionist with a beautiful heart and soul that has really guided and nourished many people. So it's a great honor and a pleasure.
Hey, everybody.
By Action program. Take it away, Nancy.
Yeah, so my slides just went away.
I know. Well, we're practicing.
Yeah,
we'll practice putting them up because they wanted to show us as people first.
Yeah, okay.
So then we'll go back to slides. Remember when we didn't have slides, we just talked and used Blackboard?
Oh, I do. I sure do remember that. Now we have to, looks like we got to load it up again.
All right. Well, tell us a word or two in the meanwhile.
So there is there are some recipes that go with this talk.
Yeah.
And also it would be helpful if you could get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, because we put some materials there that I think you would find useful for just as reference material. So I have a lot of slides, if I'm able to see them again. And we won't have time to cover all of the slides, but that's why I wanted you to have the information on the slide. So we'll make sure that you get a copy of the PowerPoint.
We will post it in our community so people on the call and people later can see both slides and recipes. Yeah.
So, okay, let's try to load that up again. Not sure it's converting the file. I'm not sure what happened to it. We had it and then it went away. Sorry. I wonder if it just lets me share screen, if that would be better. How about that? Can you guys see now? No, it's just giving me the powered by action. Oh, here we go. Okay.
Hey. Yay, thank goodness.
All right. Okay. So let's get back here. Our first one, build better bone. So the question is, can you really build bone at all stages of life? You know, typically we're building bone earlier in life. So what we really want to do is we want to strengthen our bones and prevent excess weakening of our bones. And how can we do that? Nutrition plays a huge role. What's under your control? That's what we want to talk about. Please read over our disclaimer. So one thing to point out is that bone is living, growing tissue. There are sometimes is this visual of bone in the Halloween skeleton, and it's very hard and dead. And it's quite the opposite. Just like all the other tissues in our body, it's living and it's building all of the time. But what's unusual about bones is the way bones actually build up and break down. We have this beautiful yin-yang process and these specialized cells called osteoblasts that are kind of forming bone and then they get broken down by specialized cells called osteoclasts, and those bone breakdown products get reassembled into new bone. So we call this a bone remodeling cycle. It's important to know about this because we want to know, well, oh, how can we support this? How can we, as any type of tissue, we know that we have to nourish this tissue. And so how can we do that to the best of our abilities? So can we build bone? What happens to bone over time is we lose bone. It's part of the aging process, is that with time, we get a decreasing bone mass. And this happens both in women and happens in men. It tends to happen more with women because there's a definite estrogen connection. So if you can see this chart, if I ask you, well, when is the time when we should be focusing on building bone? And that would be earlier. So I love to give this talk I give talks to young girls that are in sports teams, saying it's really important to be having your protein and your fat and starches and all your vitamins and minerals, because we're building bone now. But what happens later on in life is as we're losing bone mass, we want to make sure that we maintain bone quality. So that's what we're going to talk about. The other thing is we know that we're going to lose bone. We're going to shrink a little bit as we age. That's a given, even in the most healthiest of people. What we want to avoid, and is really the subject of this talk, is avoiding accelerated bone loss. And when does that occur? That can occur in a premature aging, in nutrient deficiencies, long-term nutrient deficiencies. If I ask somebody what their diet was like as when they were a kid and growing up, I can get an inkling about what their bones are like and what their other tissues are like. But it's not too late, even if you say, wow, as a young person, my diet really wasn't very good and really worried about my bones. And I said, yeah, well, let's focus on where we are now, because what we can do is prevent accelerated bone loss. Sedentary lifestyle. We know that we need exercise in order to get that bone mass strong. Long-term steroid use, perhaps in people with allergies or asthma. And then if there was surgery to remove the ovaries, a lot of times in cancer, you'll see this because estrogen or androgen positive cancers will be treated with hormone blocking drugs. And we know that those hormones play a large role in bone health. And there goes my slides. And so those bones, when someone's on a hormone blocker, then they can get an accelerated weakening of the bones, and that's not what we want. And so what can we do about that? So can anybody see my presentation? Or am I the only one that can't see it?
No, it looks like we lost the presentation. Sorry, Nancy.
Yeah, so let me try to load it up again. I think I said share screen, and did that one work? No, that one didn't work. I think it says share presentation, and it has to share it, it has to convert it, and hopefully we'll get it soon. It says it's converting the file.
Losing it.
Sorry, guys. I'm browsing. It's telling me to browse my files, and I'm browsing my files, but then it doesn't do anything. I wonder why it just disappears. Yeah. Oh, I think what happens is it saves it and then it converts it, and that process takes a while. And then for some reason it goes away. So just an FYI, it takes a while to save and convert it. So that's okay. Let's just keep plowing away here. Anyway, so there are things that cause accelerated bone loss, and that's what our real concern is. The normal bone loss we can handle, but accelerated bone loss. So what we're really talking about here is minimizing fracture risk, because that's what it's about. Why are we even having this conversation? We don't want people to have frailty fractures. In other words, they just have a minor fall and they break a bone. So how can we evaluate who is at risk for a bone fracture? Got a mind of its own here. So is there a history of fractures, right? Did you break bones, and was it you just tripped and broke a bone as opposed to skiing a black diamond and broke a bone? What's your family? Is there a history of fractures in the family? Your mother, your grandmother, thin, underweight, white or Asian, fair complexion. Wow, it just keeps jumping around. I'm sorry about that. I'm not touching anything. It's just got a mind of its own. Age, diet, and lifestyle. So I did a bold around diet. We can't do much about age, but we can focus on diet, and we can focus on lifestyle. And then are there medications that you're taking, cancer treatment, certain health conditions, and what is the bone mineral density? So the presentation keeps disappearing. I'm sorry for that. Can anybody see my presentation?
Nancy, do you want me to try screen sharing it on my end?
Yeah, why don't you try doing that? Because it seems to just, I get it, and then it goes away.
Okay. All right.
So,
oh, you know what? I think what might be, I'll just to give one more thing if you want to try. I think what might be happening is when you're clicking on share presentation, I think you're on the files tab. You want to click on the
video
screen tab.
camera icon.
And when you
click on the what?
Browser.
When you open up share content,
Yeah.
and then you click on share presentation, you
Yeah.
default to a tab called files. If you
Okay,
click on to the left of files, you'll see a tab called screen. And if you click on screen, then you can just share your screen. You click on entire screen, and then you just share your entire screen. Do you want to try that just to see if that works?
I just did. Do you see it?
So click on the laptop icon, share content.
Oh, but then I have to get out of my full screen.
Oh, no.
Got share content.
Okay, click on share content, then share presentation.
Got it.
And then click on to the left, you'll see there's like all these tabs on the top. Click on the screen tab.
Yeah.
And then to the right, on the right toolbar, entire screen. And then click on the image of your entire screen and click share.
Okay, I've got an entire screen.
Okay, yeah, and then click on the image, and then you'll see a blue share button on the bottom that you can click.
The only image I see is me.
Yeah, go ahead and click on that and click on share.
I don't know. Something's wrong.
Okay, perfect. And then go ahead and open up your presentation because we're now seeing all of your screen.
On here or on my?
You want to just open up your file on your desktop and yeah, there you go. We've got it. Perfect. Great job.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect. We've got it. That should stop it from freezing and closing.
I don't get it. I can't hear it. I was hearing it.
All right. Is everybody seeing the slides? Is everybody seeing the slides? Anybody seeing the slides?
Yes, we see it.
Oh, okay. All right. So we mentioned that there are certain medications and conditions that cause accelerated bone loss. And then a risk assessment. Let's talk a bit more about risk assessment. The gold standard is this bone mineral density, which is a DEXA scan, often of a hip, and people are given a T-score. And then depending on that T-score, you may be given a diagnosis of osteoporosis, osteopenia, or normal bone density. Osteopenia is a relatively new term. But here's the concern, is that bone mineral density alone is not a good predictor of fracture risk. It doesn't give us much information about bone quality. So low bone mineral density, it's one thing. If we have low bone mineral density, we are concerned. But there are some of the data is not showing a good correlation between people with the low bone mineral density and an increased risk for fracture. So what we need is really to assess bone quality. We don't really have a great tools for that. We actually look at all the different conditions, the history, the current situation, and then we decide what your risk is, and we use that along with the bone mineral density. So the issue is bone density versus bone quality, and bone quality is that's where your diet and lifestyle and stress and stress management, all that has a big effect. So there is one other tool that you can use that's more popular now called bone resorption testing. And what this does is it actually looks for bone breakdown products in the urine. It's called an NTX or a CTX. And this can be ordered through labs like LabCorp or Quest. Conventional medical doctors aren't really using this test, but I like to use it kind of in between the bone mineral density, get a baseline, and then you can test it every 6 months to get an idea of bone turnover. When we spoke about how bone does a remodeling, it does a breakdown and a buildup, then if this is happening at a rapid rate, we're going to see a high amount of these bone breakdown products in the urine. And I will correlate that with the bone mineral density to say, yeah, we really do have an issue that requires intervention and possibly medical intervention. So just want to let you know that you have this tool. So now get to what the bulk of our talk really is about is, well, what is a diet for strong bones? We do need protein. And we're finding, used to think that as you get older, you don't need so much protein. And we honestly don't know exactly, how much protein someone needs. It's highly individual. What we do know is during certain stages of your life cycle, such when you're growing, you're younger, you need more protein. And we're finding with older people, there's a concern. Older people, their appetite's not so good, diet, maybe intake is going down. They're not getting enough protein. This is a problem. So we've started to really revisit protein intake, especially among the elderly. So what I typically look for, if somebody's kind of frail and I have a lot of bone breakdown, I want them to have complete protein for 2 to 3 meals a day, as opposed to just once a day or every couple of days, where if you're not in a frail state. And what are good sources of protein? Well, your animal protein, they're going to be complete, all your amino acids. And this is our high quality eggs, fish, organic, chicken, turkey, grass-fed meat, beans, especially beans in combination with a whole grain, tofu, bone broth, protein powder, collagen powder. So we want to look at somebody's protein intake and decide if that's correct, if that looks good for them, because protein is our building blocker. So whenever we're taking in protein, we always need to have way more vegetables because they provide the minerals and vitamins that help us metabolize the protein and fat. They also help balance acidity. We know that an overly acidic environment can cause a leaching out of calcium from the bones. And so that's a bone weakening process. The other thing is the veggies provide starches and fiber, and the fiber feeds the gut bacteria. And we now know that the gut bacteria play a large role in bone remodeling and inflammation modulating. We know now that the gut bacteria plays a large role in everything. But so it's not just the protein. We want to have our protein 25% of the plate, but then we want to have half the plate, at least our cooked veggies, maybe 25% a healthy starch, a complex carb like a quinoa, wild rice, sweet potato, and then possibly a wonderful salad to go with it. And then down at the bottom, we have healthy starches. And these starches are really important for energy and also to feed the gut bacteria. So this is kind of like a chart that shows you, well, this would be like a good bone supporting meal. You don't have to have an animal food for protein. We could have beans. We could have tofu. You know, we can definitely have a vegetarian-based or plant-based as well. So protein makes up about 50% of your bone volume and a third of your bone mass. So we do want to make sure your protein's good. We might want to look at your blood levels and make sure total protein and albumin are within normal ranges. Low protein intake can increase the risk for bone mineral density and higher fracture rate. So we also want healthy fat. We still are in this kind of low fat, non-fat is the diet that is the goal. And we know that we do need healthy fat. That non-fat diet is not really health promoting. We know that healthy fat is needed for energy. We think of carbs as giving us quick energy. Fats has given us that long-term energy. But here's the deal. You need fat to absorb calcium, and you need fat to transport and absorb our fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin D, vitamin K, vitamin A, as well as our other fat-soluble goodies like beta-carotene. So having the right amount of healthy fat in the diet, olive oil, nut seeds, avocado, fish, even small amounts of organic animal foods is part of the plan for strong bones. So let's start with the basics, especially considering now here in California, it's quite hot and people are sweating more. We need to hydrate. So if you think about bones, as we get older, one of the things that happens is we get this in Chinese medicine called yin deficiency, and the water just kind of leaves our joints and they're more drier, and we get bone on bone and arthritis. And so hydration is really important to keep the fluidity of our bones. And this is what our collagens and our glucosamine, they like attract water to come into our joints. So you have to do your part and take in hydrating beverages. Bone is 22% water. Who would have thought, right? You think it's just this desiccated material, but it's not. We need water to moisturize and protect our joints. And we don't really want just water. We want to have some lemon or little juice or have broths, because the minerals in the water helps the water get into the joints. Veggie juices are great. So if I have like a green veggie juice, it's giving me minerals, it's giving me hydration, it's balancing out acidity. Herb teas, there's so many herb teas that support bones. Any mineral-rich drink or broth is going to help support our bones. So acid-alkaline balance is important. There's a strong relationship between bone loss and over-acidity. So how do we have a more neutral or alkaline environment? veggies. And it's not alkaline water. A lot of people say, oh, I should get that alkaline water. And it's like, no, not really. It's just people trying to sell their alkaline waters. If you have a lot of a veggie intensive diet and a plant focused diet, that means you can have animal foods, but mostly plant foods, then you're good with your minerals. And those minerals are the buffers. If you have good intake of mineral buffering foods, then your body doesn't have to pull calcium from the bones in order to do that buffering. The calcium buffers the blood to make sure it stays within a very narrow pH range. If you're running acidic and the body's having a hard time with that buffering process, it's going to need to pull more calcium from the bones. So more veggies, and especially potassium, and limiting acid forming, excess sugar, and things like that cause excess acidity. Plant fibers nourish your microbiota. I mentioned this a little bit, that we're finding out a lot of new research about the role that the bacteria, the microbiota, is playing. We know they have a set of genes, or more genes that come from your bacteria than come from you. It's extremely metabolically more active, and we know that it's important for your overall health. It helps to lower inflammation. There's a field called osteoimmunology, meaning that the gut bacteria, to a large extent, is going to determine the strength and balance of your entire immune system. And that itself is going to modulate inflammatory response, which is related to your bone health. So everything's connected to everything, right? This is the beauty. And our job is to nourish your cells that are in your body, that make up your tissues, your bone, and to nourish all those trillions of bacterial cells that have this wonderful relationship with us, and they provide us with all this free labor. So gut bacteria influence bone remodeling, and this is that osteoimmunology field. And so, their inflammation is huge. So inflammation drives bone loss. Inflammation drives heart disease, drives cancer. It's at the foundation for a lot of imbalances. And we know some of the pathways. One of the important pathways is rankle. So this is a target that we target a lot for cancer. But we know that when this rankle molecular signaling is on overdrive, then we actually have increased osteoclast, which is breaking down of bone. So there's a nice little review article by Chris Kresser that will explain this in a little bit more detail. So, maybe it's getting into more technical detail than you want, but I find that if people understand some of the mechanisms, then you can be better with compliance. So what do you do for better gut bacteria? Eat a diverse and abundant amount of plant fibers. That's number one. Second, enjoy cultured foods. And that's what you can do that's under your control. Cultured foods. At least once a day, have a serving of cultured food, whether it's yogurt or dairy-free yogurt or your kefir, sauerkraut, or any fermented veggie. Miso. Miso is great in a dressing. Tempeh, tofu, or tempeh, not tofu. Apple cider vinegar goes well in a dressing. Kombucha, beet kvass, fermented beets. So you can go to the store and find a large variety of cultured foods. You also can make them yourself. And so that's replenishing your gut bacteria. This is so much better than taking a probiotic supplement, because the bacteria come in with these foods. And imagine the yogurt, the bacteria in the yogurt is actually doing talk to all of the cells in the oral mucosa. You have this wonderful crosstalk going on. And this is where it's starting. The intestines, immune system, it starts in the mouth, goes all the way to the anus. So when you take a cultured food, you get that opportunity for all that wonderful cellular crosstalk. Taking a pill, you just take the pill and you hope that it gets down to the colon. So if you want to take a probiotic supplement and it's helping you, fine, but it shouldn't substitute the cultured food. And then what about foods rich in calcium? It isn't all about dairy, but yes, dairy is a very good source for calcium, as is fish, sardines and salmon, tuna, all fish. If you have sardines with the little bones, they're soft, that's even better. And then the fish is going to give you other benefits. It has protein, it has healthy omega-3 fats, it's anti-inflammatory. Beans and lentils. So I gave you some recipe for a bean salad. I call it a bone-building bean salad. Beans, I think, are the undervalued superfood, and beans are a source of calcium. They're also a source of all kinds of other nutrients, that fiber, and just wonderful, wonderful bone-enriching foods. Lentils. So what goal would be having a cup of beans a day, adding beans to a soup, adding beans to a salad, substituting beans for meat, mixing beans with a whole grain, having a bean hummus. The latest bean thing I came up with was adding beans to your smoothie. Sounds a little weird, but it's actually pretty cool. It adds a nice creaminess and adds fiber and protein and all sorts of nutrients and yumminess. Nuts and seeds, especially sesame seeds. Sesame seeds, good source of calcium. So what you can do is get some tahini paste and mix it up, make a tahini sauce. So I gave you a recipe for roasted cauliflower with tahini sumac. And it just tells you how to mix your tahini. Everybody's got their own way of making tahini sauce. And just what works for you. You add some olive oil, you add some garlic. So I added some sumac just to give it. Sumac is a wonderful Middle Eastern spice, and it adds some antioxidant power, and it adds a nice little tartness, and it looks kind of cool, looks purple. I also gave you a recipe for a zucchini tahini creamy soup. It's summertime. We're going to start getting all these zucchinis coming out of the garden. What are we going to do with them all? One thing we can do is make a nice zucchini tahini soup. So I use tahini paste and tahini sauce a lot when I'm working with my clients, most of whom have challenged with cancer and have taste challenges. That tahini adds an umami and adds a nice palatability. Leafy greens, wonderful source of calcium. And see, that's the cool thing about foods. You don't just get calcium. You get all the other wonderful minerals as well as fiber. And then soy. Soy is actually edamame, tofu, tempeh, real soy. Stay away from the processed soy hot dogs and things like that. So is dairy beneficial or harmful? So here's the deal with dairy. And I gave you a link so you could look at some of this information yourself. Some of the concerns are commercial dairy is pretty toxic. They give the animals, shoot them up with hormones, and they give them antibiotics. Goats, they don't do that, so you're better off with goat dairy. The other thing is, what are they fed? Are they fed grass versus corn or soy and pesticides? So obviously, you're going to want to get organic where they don't have hormones or antibiotics, and the feed does not have pesticides. Cows do not digest soy and corn. They get sick, so they eat grass. But we give them soy and corn because it fattens them up, makes them inflamed, and that's not what we want to do. So if you go with a reputable dairy, you can have small amounts of dairy. You do have normal growth factor in dairy. So even the best of the best dairy, we don't want to do a lot of it. Dairy is meant for babies because of the growth association. For adults, we typically recommend that you have cultured dairy, such as yogurt or kefir. The other thing that's going on with dairy is lactose intolerance, which is very common. And then casein allergy is a big deal in America because we typically use the Holstein cow. 90% of U.S. dairy is Holstein, which has a type of casein protein that's a little bit more pro-allergenic. We find the Jersey cow or Guernsey cow is easier to digest, less allergenic. And you may have seen like A2. So A2 can be easier to digest. And then there is saturated fat in dairy. So the take homes for dairy is just small amounts, hormone-free, organic, grass-fed, sustainable, and then cultured dairy. And then here are some just kind of articles. I feel bad that people, especially in the cancer world, they're told, don't eat dairy. And I think, wow, I'm missing out on a good protein source, a good source for calcium, and with cultured dairy, a good source for probiotics. So I think small amounts of high quality yogurt is actually quite beneficial for most people. If you have issues digesting it, you can go with a dairy-free yogurt. So this is grass-fed, has a much better nutrient profile. So the data is there. It does make a difference. I'll go through this a little bit quickly in the interest of time. But beyond dairy, you don't have to have dairy. So if you have a diverse amount of plant foods, nuts and seeds, you'll find that you'll actually get a good amount of dairy. Greens, get your greens in. Again, you're going to get calcium and you're going to be getting a lot of other wonderful vitamins and minerals. So make an easy green juice, blend everything up. So this is kind of a time when we're getting creative about juices or what we're drinking. So I like to just put a bunch of veggies in a blender and I'll put an apple or something to make it taste better. And I put a little bit of nut butter. So the thing about making a green smoothie or green juice is that if you have a little bit of fat, which is some almonds or Brazil nuts, or a tablespoon of a nut butter, or even coconut oil, the fat is going to facilitate absorption of the fat-soluble vitamins. So I mentioned a little bit about tahini. And so here's a recipe. You can go online and get other recipes and use tahini as a base. But tahini is a good source of calcium, and it's just a delicious nut paste from sesame seeds. Seaweed is another wonderful source of not only calcium, but also iodine and other wonderful minerals. I like to get a bag of sea vegetables and put them in a soup, or I rehydrate them and strain them and I'll put them in a salad. A great way to add calcium and iodine and all kinds of other wonderful goodies. So this is another booster food. And then foods with vitamins D, A, and K. So D, A, and K are big players for bone health. Vitamin D facilitates calcium absorption. We get them from animal foods such as egg yolks. So we still have some weird misinformation out there that egg white is a health food, which is pretty silly. Chickens don't lay egg whites. So having a whole food is the way we want to go. Small amounts of fish like a salmon and sardines. Also, mushrooms will give you vitamin D, especially if you leave them out in the sun. I leave them out in the sun so if I'm going to make sauteed mushrooms for dinner, I put my mushrooms out on the sun in the kitchen and then for the day. Vitamin A, if you eat your green leafies. And then vitamin K is a big player. That vitamin K is what tells calcium to go into the bones. And so it's a concern if we're taking calcium supplements that is the calcium being directed into the bones instead of on the heart valves or kidney vessels? And so K2 facilitates the calcium getting into the bones. So this is why if you're taking extra D, you want to take extra K. And sometimes a multivitamin will be good enough for the K. But vitamin D, how much should you take? Depends on what your blood level is. It's debatable. Somewhere between 40 and 60 nanograms is a target for chronic disease prevention. So you want to take enough vitamin D as a supplement to get you into that target blood range. So here's some information about K2. and where to get it, and whether if you're taking extra vitamin D as a supplement, you want to take extra K2 as well. Sometimes you'll see K2 with K1. And then soy. Soy is actually a lot of data showing that it can be very, very helpful source of bioavailable protein and calcium if it is fortified. And then beans. I already talked about beans. Beans for bones. You get protein, you get fiber, you get minerals. If you have issues digesting beans, then we got to work on your digestion. So just do smaller amounts of beans, and let's work on taking some apple cider vinegar with our meals, or digestive enzymes, and make sure you soak your beans. Calming inflammation, an anti-inflammatory diet, which is a plant-focused diet. Most of what you're eating are plants. And you have a lot to choose from. You got veggies, you got grains, you got fruit, nuts, seeds, spices, herbs. That's the bulk of your diet. And then you take your animal foods as kind of like your condiment. Other things that can calm inflammation. Remember, inflammation drives osteoporosis and other chronic diseases. So green tea, olives, olive oil, garlic, turmeric, ginger, and then eliminating the bad stuff, the sugar, the alcohol, small amounts of alcohol, but processed foods. So it's 12:50. So I need some feedback here about whether I should continue.
Yeah, say go ahead, Nancy.
Just continue?
Yeah, I would roll through it even if we go 10, 15 minutes after, because we've had difficulties. So
yeah, I just don't want anybody to, have to jump off, or don't get I don't want anybody to not get their questions answered.
Okay,
So,
I mean, it's such important information. Let's just get through
okay,
it.
So I'm gonna keep walking through. If
people can post in the chat, a lot of it has been technical.
Yeah, so you can talk to me. I mean, you can tell me when to stop and do questions, and I'll just keep going until then. So anyway,
that could be till tomorrow, Nancy.
What?
Could be till tomorrow.
So anti-inflammatory diet. I think colors. This is such a wonderful time. Go to the farmer's market. I mean, this is just, wow. We've got stone fruit. We've got watermelon. We have so much growing in the fields right now. It's just such a time to be enjoying all of our plant friends, and knowing that all of the compounds and goodies in our plants are actually helping to keep us healthy and keeping our bones strong. And so that's the fun part. I hope you go into the farmers markets and getting something new and cool, like a watermelon radish, or just going to the farmers market as a tourist to say, whoa, what's this all about? And ask the farmer when he's got something there, because you're supporting your local farmers. It hasn't traveled very far, so the nutrient density is high. So yeah, this is a time to just have color and local foods in your diet. Oh, prunes. Let's do a shout out for prunes. A lot of times people want prunes for the laxative effect, if they need that, because as people get older, things can slow down. But who knew that prunes are super high in boron? What's up with boron? Well, boron, we know, works very synergistically with vitamin D and estrogen in maintaining bone strength. So this is why the importance of a abundance of plant foods, a diversity of plant foods. So not just the same old, getting some prunes. I like to make a prune vinaigrette. So I'll blend up some prunes and strain it, and then I mix it in with some olive oil and other dressing. And sometimes I don't strain it. I make it like a little chunky. But soaking prunes during the day and then having them at night with some soaked chia seeds or oatmeal, something like that. Just getting creative on how you get prunes. So avoiding the yuck stuff, because these guys create too much acidity. You can have them once in a while, but you're not getting any nutrition. And we're saying excess coffee. So you can have your cup of coffee a day, but if you're drinking coffee all day, then that's having a calcium depleting and an over acidifying situation. So excess of anything is actually the issue, right? It's about balance. So think about that yin yang of bone remodeling, bone formation, breakdown. So everything is about balance, right? So your body's like that too, avoiding excesses, because excesses is what's going to imbalance and trigger excess bone breakdown. So supplements, I always get a lot of questions. What should I do for a bone supplement? Always check with your medical doctor, because who knows what you're doing. Are you on other medications? What are your conditions? Are you on a blood thinner? A lot of variability. Don't self-treat. Check with your doctor or licensed practitioner and say, hey, I want to take some supplements. Is this good for me? And what are some good brands, right? So the big thing about bone health supplements, it's not just about taking calcium. Back years ago, doctors were recommending 1,200 milligrams of calcium, and that was a problem, because what was happening is you can't absorb more than 500 milligrams of calcium at a time. The excess calcium gets calcified. Calcification is part of the aging process. It can calcify on the heart valves, calcification anywhere in the body. It's part of the aging process. So we don't want to just take calcium. We want to take it with vitamin D and magnesium and all the other goodies that it synergizes with, that helps it get into the bone. We mentioned vitamin K2, for example. So I find that if you go with a food-based supplement, the body will take what it needs, and it's in a bioavailable form. So I kind of like that. And if you have an osteoporosis and you do need the calcium, the forms that work well is you can start with malate or citrate. And the one that's the most absorbable they've found is MCHC, microcrystalline hydroxyapatite. That's really a bone derivative. What you will find in a bone health supplement, you'll find a formula that will have some MCH, sometimes it's called MCHC, some malate, and some citrate. But for example, just taking calcium citrate is not going to be as effective as taking some calcium in several forms with magnesium, with D3, and with some calcium. Now, sometimes the bone support may not have D3 or K, because you may get that somewhere else. So there's quite a bit of variation, but and you may want to ask somebody for what are some particular brands. But food-based is always a good place to start.
Hey, Nancy, what about magnesium? Could you speak a little more about that in relation to the other minerals?
That's a good question, because so different forms of magnesium, for example, magnesium citrate is going to be a laxative. Magnesium oxide is maybe a little laxative, but it's not absorbable. So in terms of absorbability, magnesium glycinate, magnesium taurate gives you a little extra heart health. What you can find is a blend. So you'll get just magnesium glycinate or a blend of glycinate, citrate, malate, aspartate, maybe taurate. So as long as it's not just citrate or just oxide, you're probably good. Glycinate's the most common one, and it's most absorbable. There's a new kid on the block. Well, not that new now. It's called magnesium threonate, threonate. And that tends to be really good for brain health and mood support. And you do have to watch marketing claims. That's the big deal about supplements. And so there's been a lot of marketing claims on threonate. And so how well does it work for mind support? I don't know. I always tell people try it, but don't spend a lot of money. You'll probably get just as good results, say, with a glycinate. And then vitamin D3, I will say, you don't want to overdo. Look at all the vitamin Ds. Like if you're getting it from a multi, you're getting it from a bone support. So most people are good with about 2,000 IUs per day. Some people need up to 5,000. Some people need 10,000, depending on what your blood level is. If your blood level's 10, 19, that's pretty low. I like it to be between 40 and 60. Some people have genetic situations that it's hard to get their D3 up. So taking 5,000 a day with A and K and to get you to be 40 is totally fine. But you don't want to do excess so that your vitamin D3 is up into like the hundreds. Yeah. And then, yeah, so this is a little blurb about D3 with K and A. And as far as K2 as well, what form of K2? So the MK7 is the one that's the most studied. So you can look for MK7 form of K2, and that can be separate to the D3, or you take it with the D3. But even if it's not MK7, if you're eating a lot of green leafy vegetables, it's diet first. We really don't want to rely on our supplements. For vitamin D, that's probably one of the supplements that most people need, because it's just involved in deficiencies in vitamin D, a risk factor for cancer, osteoporosis, heart disease. So we do want to have our vitamin D. Taking vitamin D for most people makes sense. Taking zinc for most people makes sense because deficiencies are so common. And vitamin A, we get them from foods, but a lot of times the vitamin D3 will include some A. And so sleep and melatonin, I didn't want to shout this out because everything is related. So your bone has a circadian rhythm, your bone remodeling. So if you're not sleeping because of many different reasons, and melatonin is not adequately being secreted, that's a problem. So we find taking some melatonin may help. Melatonin affects osteoblast and osteoclast activity. So support a healthy sleep-wake hygiene. In other words, sleep in the dark. Let the sun get into your eyes in the morning. That will cause your melatonin to go down and your cortisol to go up. And then later on, it's dark, everything dark. So your cortisol goes down and your melatonin goes up. And I find a lot of people just need to, if they take a 5-HTP, that will convert to serotonin, which will convert to melatonin. So I've heard some people say 5-HTP with vitamin B6 tends to help them sleep because it gets converted to melatonin. I'm finding as people get older, what happens is the pineal gland that makes melatonin it calcifies, or it's just not putting out the melatonin. It's like everything else, your bones going down. So a lot of times adding in some melatonin, starting with like 3 mgs, can be helpful not only for sleep, but for bones. So whatever it is that you have to do for sleep, I recommend like a wonderful chamomile tea, loose chamomile tea in a French press, calming activities, magnesium foot bath, Epsom salts foot bath, getting to bed at 10 o'clock, whatever you can do to enrich your sleep or address a sleep challenge is going to help with your bones. So this is big. It's not just big for bones. It's big for heart health. It's for brain health. So really addressing the sleep. Better sleep for better bones. And so this is more information, just so you know, I'm not just making this stuff up, that this is the science behind melatonin and bones. Weight-bearing exercise, of course. Move. We got to move. The other thing about it is we're trying to prevent a frailty fracture. So you want to be strong and flexible and balanced. So I always recommend people do things that require balancing, dancing. What's that new tennis-like thing? Pickleball. Try new things, especially older people. Just going for a walk. You got to do some other stuff. You got to do some dancing or play badminton, play bike riding, so that your balance is getting recharged. We want to prevent falling in the first place, right? Also have fun, swap it up. So here's our takeaways. Adequate intake of protein for you. Adequate intake of vegetables. So you're going to have 3 to 5 to 10 times the amount of vegetables as protein. Appropriate intake of healthy fat. And also diversification. So we can say, intake of vegetables, we want an abundance, but we also want diversify. Daily exercise, weight bearing. Yoga is a form of weight bearing. You're using your own weight. So if you do even the sun salutation or you do plank pose, you're using your body as the weight. And that's a simple thing to do. So as we get older, we not only lose bone mass, we lose muscle mass. We have to work out to maintain, right? So it's really important to have joyful movement be part of your daily life. And then supplements, DEXA scans, just to know where you're at. And then if you want to think about the cross-links urine test, you can go online and get that done yourself. And then consult with the physician if you really are at a scary osteoporosis stage. There are medications. It's another whole discussion. There's the bisphosphonates, and then there's the monoclonals. I prefer the monoclonals, but talk to your doctor about that as well. Yeah, we made it. So, questions?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
So, it was a lot of information, and some of it is general wellness. Okay. So
Right.
for all of us, it's like we're looking at a single part of our body, but our overall wellness and our overall lifestyle and our overall mindset and our overall environment
Exactly.
is important and powerful, because the neurochemicals that we create in response to stress or fear, fear is so big. Oh my God, I'm afraid my
Right.
bones are going to break. I'm afraid I'm going to die.
Right.
And medicine is very good at putting Band-Aids on things, including on fragile bones.
Right.
So again, I understand that that's their job and they do it. But they're not encouraging people this thing about bones are living tissue like hair and skin and nerves and organs. It is definitely alive. And it really loves well-being and good food and nature and sunshine, all these great things. So for those of us listening and those of us advising our parents and elders is get outside, go for a walk, be in a happy state and eat well, because even if you take a good bone building supplement, and there are many out there, all of the A's, B's, C's, D's, E's, Meg, if you're still frightened and scared and stressed, you're not absorbing much. You see?
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean that you may need some extra mag, cal, D, etc.
Right.
The other thing that has been seen is people who lean hard on calcium, even follow the 1,000, 1,500 milligrams of calcium, wind up having joint problems, having arterial sclerosis, because it's not uptaken by the bones because of various malabsorption problems. So calcium's very abundant in the food chain, animal, vegetable, it's in the food chain. And it's also naturally balanced with magnesium and trace minerals in a healthy food diet. So I think even with people who are low on their bone scan and their osteopenia and so forth, if they really up their health practices, they'll get stronger and their bone density will strengthen across a year or two.
Yeah, absolutely.
So again, it's not a quickie. It's not like in 2 months, 3 months, you see it, but over time, healthy elders is a whole new phenomenon. Studying the health and the regeneration of people in their 70s and 80s and 90s. Those people are bicycling, and those people are outdoors, and those people have transcended a certain amount of kind of situational stress if they're able to. And even with people who are on medication for, preventing, if they do fall, they snap like a turkey bone.
Right.
Because it makes hard bones, but they make them brittle bones, and that's not so good. So it's tricky. Getting off medication is outside of our scope. But being more confident in the kind of overall wellness practices is something that we can really support.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, you have a question. Chris, did you have a question? Go ahead.
I was having a conversation the other day with a friend, and she said that they did this study where they said that you have to use a minimum of 25-pound weights in order to really get keep healthy bone density and bone mass. It's not enough to walk. It's not enough to ride a bike or swim.
Yeah.
That you actually have to really work, stress things, not in a bad way, but push I guess stress it a little bit in order for it to really work well. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, it's actually true. And it's a tricky one because when I'm working with people going from a sedentary to a starting to do some weight bearing, we have to go so slow because their tendons, everything is so tight and we're so vulnerable for damage. So I'm just telling people, do the best that you can. Let's start out. This is why yoga is a great place to start because you're using your own body as a weight. So you're not really going to be building bone. What you're doing is you're strengthening everything. You're increasing flexibility in order to really have a stabilizing effect on bone. Yeah, you got to get into some weights. And most of the people I work with, they're not going to do more than 5-pound weights or they're going to hurt themselves. So I'm going to say, do the best that you can, and pick up the weights. If you want to get into weights like 25-pound weights, you got to work with a fitness trainer because the potential for doing damage is very high. Yes. And then
I'm up to 12. I'm up to 12, and I'm
that's like, really good.
Well, that's but really it's, there's some I can't do at all. There's some movements I just can't, with my arms and all that. I can't do it at all.
Well, I can't, for example, take things over my head because I have cervical vertebra issues, and every time I do an online class, they've got our 10-pound weights going over our head. Right. And I said, it's like telling somebody to do a back bend. It's like, no, I can't do that. So we have to be careful, but you know what else is really good, I think, is the diversity. Get people out and moving. You're riding a bike, you're playing pickleball because you're engaging your brain with your body movement. And that's really good for balance to prevent people from falling. So you do want to maintain bone mass, maintain muscle mass in order to really stabilize and improve. Yeah, you got to get up with more weights, but start out small and build up. And you may want to work with a fitness trainer for somebody that really needs to add more pounds.
I mean, 25, that would be double what I'm doing.
Yeah, I probably,
I'll have to build up to that, if I ever do.
I would,
it just seems like
I'm not going to go there.
But, this is the problem with most recommendations. They're not looking at individuals.
Yeah.
Individuals have their own issues and their own age and their own limitations.
Right.
So if they're big athletes, okay, cool. But if they're a bit on the frail side, then people have to be very mindful.
Absolutely.
Because hurting yourself is really rough. We don't want that to happen.
No.
So, just the reps are more important than the weight.
And having fun and consistency.
Yeah.
Right. So like some people, lifting weight, they don't want to just lift weights. It's boring. But doing something else, and making it fun is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyone else, folks? Well, I appreciate everyone, and particularly Nancy.
Sure.
This is a stress test. It's like dealing with.
I know. It's like, where are the slides?
The worst thing. I was saying, Nancy, just talk, and then sooner or later,
it'll come on.
It came along.
Yeah, I don't know. I probably wasn't sharing the skin.
Nancy, if people want to follow up with you, get in touch, is there an email or website or anything?
It's on the slide deck.
Yeah.
You should share the slide deck because
We will.
what I did is at the end is kind of like ideas for an eating plan for better bones. Everybody likes to eat their different foods, but I'm always being asked, well, what should I eat? You know, what should I eat for breakfast? What should I do? It's like, well, here's ideas. And then you can look at these as ideas and then you can modify them to work for you. And so it'd be nice if people had that. And then I put some resources and references that the bare bone broth cookbook, you know, making a nice bone broth, you know, and so there's quite a few resources and references that are on here. So I think the information in the slide deck would be useful for people who attended the talk.
We will make sure that it reaches people as well as being posted, because with these programs, people watch them afterwards. So,
well, that's true too. Yeah,
that's how it is.
Yeah, that's actually true. And apologies for technical difficulties, but you know what?
We got through. You know, everyone can. You
the
know,
way it goes.
A little exercise.
That's right.
Body bones moving and.
No problem, Nancy. You handled it like a pro. And again, just for clarification, the slide deck and the 2 recipes are currently available for download. If you go to your upper right corner and click on handouts, all 3 of them will be listed and you can click download to download them. And we'll also post them to our event page as well, so you can get them there as well.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and enjoy your weekend.
Yeah, stay cool.
Enjoy the summer. Be well. We'll see you soon.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Take care, Nancy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.